Hello, 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 and welcome to BSB Preview. I am so excited. It is bright and sunny in the BSB office today. Super glad not to be doing these in the dark anymore. Yay for spring. I'm pretty sure everybody knows me, but I'm Sandy. I am Bold Stroke's senior editor. This is BSB Preview. We are featuring our April titles, which will be coming out in just a couple days. With me, I have Genevieve McCluer, Aurora, and Jessie J. Thoma. So they're going to be reading from you for the books. I need a couple of minutes to set up our Facebook feed. So I have a question for our panelists to start off. And that is, why did you choose to write in the genre you write in? And is there a genre you haven't written in that you would like to? Take it away.
Okay, she told me to go first. I'm not just jumping in. I'm never the first answerer. I write romance, and I write it because it's the genre of hope and love, and I'm all squishy like that. It's my favorite genre to read, and I feel like life is stressful enough, and there's enough angst in my day-to-day existence that knowing that I'm going to get a happily ever after is sort of the ultimate payoff. As for a genre I haven't written but would consider or would like to try, I would say memoir. I've read some books, I've read some phenomenal memoirs, I've done a little creative nonfiction, but I have not gone there yet. So that is my answer. Genevieve, do you want to answer? Would you like your cat to answer? I think either would be okay.
Okay, try saying it. I don't think he's gonna say it.
No.
Okay, well, okay. No cat then. I write largely in paranormal romance because I like being able to, one, I've just always been obsessed with mythology, but I like being able to use more fantastical creatures and stories to explore very human concepts and emotions and allowing me to abstract them a bit more. And for something I would like to write more in, I haven't completely not written in it. It's just I've been trying to do a few more action-y books instead of just romance all the time.
I guess I'm up. I write romance, although I don't think that mine are all that squishy. I add a little bit more angst than, I don't know, somebody said that I write on the fringes of polite society. So I guess what genre would I like to write more in? I think I like to read science fiction and fantasy, so maybe that genre. I've not done it, so it would be very new and different for me, but I don't know, I like to read it a lot, so it would be fun to write something like that.
I feel like a lot of good authors write on the edges of polite society, so you're in good company there. Alrighty, we do have a coupon code tonight that will give you 15% off these guys' April releases if you pre-order tonight before 7:30. So I will post that in the chat roll for everyone. The other thing to let you know that unfortunately Aimee is not able to join us. She's in France and it is very middle of the night there. Not sure exactly what time, but not a good time for Zoom. So we do have a recording for her, and we are going to start with her book called Always Believe. It is a contemporary romance that has kind of a religious setting and conflict. So give me 1 second to...
Hello everyone, this is Aimee. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person, but it's going to be the middle of the night for me, so I'm afraid you're going to have to do the recording. So I'm going to read a little from my novel Always Believe, which is going to come out in April, and is about an army doctor, Grayson, who's actually coming out of the army and starting a new job, which could be better described as a vocation. And she's going to meet Angela, who's still reading from let's say, a life accident, more than that, who's a complete opposite in terms of beliefs. And well, we're going to see how it goes. I'm going to start at the beginning because usually it's a good place to start. We meet in the name of Jesus Christ, who died and was raised to the glory of God the Father. Grace and mercy be with you. We have come here today to remember before God our sister Sybil, to give thanks for her life, to commend her to God, our merciful Redeemer and Judge, and to comfort one another in our grief. As she listened to the now familiar service, Grace and Wolston took a moment to remember all the men and women who'd been laid to rest with those same words. Too many, always too many. Why did she always remember the ones she had not been able to save, instead of the ones who had survived? Of course, she wanted to believe they had not died in vain. It was one of the reasons she had joined the Royal Army Medical Corps, because somehow saving soldiers' lives was even more important than saving civilians, or so she had thought when she was younger. The other reason, of course, had been to piss off her parents. Reverend Jones intoned, "Father, you know our hearts and share our sorrows. We're gathered here today to remember Sybil, whom we loved. When we may be angry at the loss we have sustained, when we long for comfort, yet do not find the words to offer it, offer us solace in our sorrow by strengthening our faith, and turn our grief to firmer hope in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen." She bowed her head with the rest of the congregation during the prayer. It was always harder for the living, the ones that remained behind, especially after the death of a child. That took unbelievable strength and courage to overcome. Grayson scanned the group assembled in the chapel. The parents, but who was who? Two women in black and a man, apparently supporting both of them. A young willowy blonde and a more mature redhead. Maybe the younger one was the deceased sister? She looked young enough, so the others must be the parents. A little boy, looking bewildered, nestled between them. An elderly man, supported by another blonde woman, also sat in the family pew, with two middle-aged men who looked like carbon copies of each other. Only the two blonde women were crying, and somehow Grayson thought they were probably not the closest to the deceased. Our days are like the grass. We flourish like a flower of the field. When the wind goes over it, it is gone, and its place will know it no more. But the merciful goodness of the Lord endures forever and ever toward those that fear him, and his righteousness upon their children's children. Grayson glanced at the open coffin. The child could have been asleep. Her face was intact, and she looked at peace, but so young. At the end of the service, she stood unobstructedly at the back, while Reverend Jones comforted the family. She could hear a few words. "Angela, I'm so sorry for your loss." She heard the redhead's reply to, "James wanted this funeral. I didn't. You know I don't believe in God anymore." Grayson's heart constricted. If you couldn't find solace in him, how could you move on? When it was her turn to offer her condolence, she soberly shook the hands of the family, murmuring, "She's at peace now, in a better place with God." The mother did not even look up, but by the stiffening of her posture and her limp handshake, Grayson knew she had said the wrong thing.
So we're starting off with a little bit of a light reading there from Aimee. I do promise that it does get a little more cheerful as the book goes on. But like Jesse, the book does deal with a lot of angst and some religious themes, as you can see in there, but there is a romance. So please do check it out. That's Always Believe by Aimee. All right, up next, we have Genevieve reading from her April release, A Fae Tale. I'm going to hand it over to you, Genevieve, and everyone else, if you can mute yourself and just stop video, that will give Genevieve the floor.
Okay. Right, I was already holding it. My book is A Fae Tale. It's a paranormal romance based somewhat loosely on Lithuanian mythology. Devana and Rosa met when they were both 6. Devana is a girl from Lithuania, and Rosa is a Aimee, a type of Lithuanian fae. They became fast friends, but when Devana first got home after they met, Rosa disappeared and they never saw each other again. And Devana would leave her food as a present along with a letter, and Rosa would leave money in return with a letter of her own, or gold in return. It's now 15 years later, and Devana has realized there has to be a reason Rosa is avoiding her, and Rosa is asking her grandmother for advice. Okay. Even as a Aimee travels, my grandmother's home is a long trek. It takes me hours to find her secluded little abode, a damp, dark cave affixed with all sorts of magical accoutrements. I've never been quite certain if she keeps them because she actually uses them or because they add the appearance she wants for when humans see it. About halfway in, I find her, ever the picture of an old hag stirring some sort of cauldron. I wonder what's in it. "Rosa, is that you?" she asks without turning. I stop a few meters away, not sure what to say. I need her advice, badly, but I can't risk giving everything away. "Yes, grandmother." She turns a warm smile on her face as she beckons. She's more hunched than I recall, but she always looked aged, even when I was a newborn. Come in. I've nearly finished fixing stew. Are you hungry?" "It was a long walk. I would appreciate it." Sit. She clears beakers, a mortar and pestle, and pages of notes from the table and pulls out an old chair, the once black paint showing the wood beneath it. I do as she tells me. "Thank you." The stirring resumes, and she seems to lose track of time, not bothering to say any more. I'm not sure if I should ask her something. She's much more insightful than me. I'd rather not risk her finding out what I want to avoid. That should do it. She shakes a large canister of salt over the pot and scoops out the contents with 2 healthy-sized bowls. "Now, where am I going to sit?" she ponders. I start to stand. "Don't you dare. You've been walking all day. Relax." She waddles off and returns a few minutes later holding a stool, again waving me off when I try to help her as she sets it before the table and moves more of her equipment. "Now, where were we? I believe you wanted my advice. Something to do with the future?" "We haven't had that part of the conversation yet, grandmother," I mutter. She always gets so confused. Sometimes I fear that I'll be like that too if I give in to my powers the same way she has. Right. She raises the stew to her lips, taking a deep sip of hot broth. Perfect. Is it not to your liking? I take a sip and end up draining half the bowl before I'm finished. Wow, I was hungrier than expected. No, it's great. I'm glad to hear that. So, you just got here? Yes. Then I ask what it is you want, and you tell me that your mother told you to come here. Traditionally, I would supply my own response. She chuckles, swirling her stew. Oh, but there's no meat on your bones. Let me get you some food. You already did. She glances at my stew. More then. She approaches the untended cauldron with my bowl and tops it off before setting it back on the table. Much better. Thank you, grandmother. Hello, Rosa. It's good to see you. Your mother must have sent you. I nod. It's nice to see you as well. But that doesn't mean that it won't work. What? She shakes her head. I haven't offered the first suggestion yet, have I? You said you were trying to change the future. What have you seen that so troubles you? Has she already seen my answer? Of course I wouldn't be able to tell her, not yet anyway. She'd have to have seen it from some far-off future when it's no longer relevant, and she doesn't like to skip that far ahead if she can avoid it. It's nothing like that. My interest is purely theoretical. Now that's never true. What's the worry? Well, she'll likely forget that I didn't answer if I just press on. There is a future that I've been trying to alter for over a decade. No matter what I do, the end result is the same, and I've merely delayed it. Can fate really be immutable? If anyone would know how to change a destiny that stubborn, it would be you, right, grandmother? She sips her stew as she considers, or possibly considers calling out my avoiding her question. Some futures are not so malleable. Like death? Or love? Or even some bad stew. It's not about the importance of the event, it's about the likelihood of it. Everything will die, most people will find love, and everyone will eat bad stew. Right, I agree hesitantly. She finishes and lets the empty bowl fall to the floor. Maybe she thought she'd already put it away. Say, for instance, that your dear friend was in an abusive relationship. You may have seen a future where he killed her, or perhaps a she rather than he. Humans tend to those odd choices as much as they tend toward killing. It's best not to judge them. I think we can judge in that situation. For the murder, perhaps, but not for going back to her. No matter how you try to change the future, there's nothing that can guarantee that she'll free herself. The best you can do is offer a supportive environment, but until she decides that she's willing to move on, not even the gods themselves could tell her otherwise. I'm not sure I understand. No one is in an abusive relationship. But stew then. You can tell her that she won't like it, but until she tastes it, it won't change a thing. Even if you were to take all of her ingredients in pots, that would only delay it. Someday she'll eat that terrible stew you so fear. Not even your sight can prevent that, my dear child. I sigh. Did that answer my question? I'm not sure, but I really want more stew now. With honey bread. Or just the honey bread.
I love that. Only you can create a metaphor with stew. I love it. So this book obviously is about Fae, but it's about, and hopefully I pronounced this right, the Lithuanian Fae. Did I get that right?
Lithuanian culture, the country.
Okay. So what inspired you to write about the Lithuanian Fae specifically?
Well, I have a lot of family in Lithuania, and I've spent some time there. So honestly, I was just really craving some Kepta one day, and was thinking about making a story based on that.
Of course you were. Awesome. All righty. Up next, we have Jessie J. Thoma. If Jessie can start her video. Awesome. All right. And Jessie is reading from her April release, Courage, which is the second book in an ongoing series that she has. So when you're ready, go ahead, introduce the book and the series, and start reading whenever you like.
Sure. So this is Courage. And although it is a series in that there are some recurring themes and a couple of characters that overlap, each book can be read as standalone. So don't be scared to just jump in with Courage and not worry about the first one, which is called Serenity. So for anybody who's unfamiliar, Serenity is first part of Serenity Prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So spoiler alert, there's a third one coming out called Wisdom. So this book is about two characters. One is a social worker who's a ride-along clinician with a police department, and her police officer partner named Tommy. And so this scene is after they've just kind of had their first event where Natasha's able to prove her worth, because Tommy's very resistant to having a civilian come in and kind of tell her how to do her job. And so she doesn't see the purpose of having that at all as part of her life and that part of her job. So they've sort of had kind of a first success, and Tommy's maybe thawing a little bit. Their relationship thus far, work-wise, has been pretty rocky. Natasha let Tommy order their first from the questionable-looking food truck where they stopped for lunch. The man in the truck leaned so far out the window to greet Tommy, she thought he might tumble to the ground. It seemed unlikely that someone who was willing to risk that kind of fall would poison a cop. And the food did smell amazing. I never would have pictured you for a 4-sausage kind of lady. Tommy balled up her napkin and tossed it in the to-go box. Those aren't sausages, they're fancy hot dogs. I went easy on you since it was your treat. I hope you're not going to be hungry the rest of our shift. When my nieces get hungry, they get whiny and angry. Is that what I have to look forward to the rest of the day? Natasha saw a hint of a smile on Tommy's face. I don't need to be hungry to get angry. And, sorry about that. I don't need to be hungry to get angry, Officer Finch, but I very rarely whine. Tommy raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Natasha moved on. So, Tommy, tell me, why did we have lunch clear across town, so far from the station, at a food truck that looks like it had its heyday in the 60s? Because it's Lenny's truck. Natasha waited for more information. None came. Am I supposed to know Lenny? Tommy laughed. No, Lenny's just an old friend of my dad's. After he retired, he started up his food truck. He'd always wanted to have one, but he refuses to come close to my station. He says it would be taking advantage of our relationship, so I haul over here as often as I can to grab a bite. Why did he call you J2? Tommy looked at the ground. Whatever J2 meant, it was personal. Look, you don't have to tell me. I was just curious since I'd never heard anyone call you that before. No, it's okay. It's just your mortal enemy, and now you feel like you have to share something with me that makes you vulnerable. Am I close? You know I don't think of you as my mortal enemy, right? We just have different views of policing. Tommy, we don't see policing differently. Bad guys do bad things. You round them up with as little force as possible and as much respect as possible and toss them in jail. I'm fine with that. Where we're getting stuck is on the gray areas of who's a bad guy and who needs someone more like me than they need someone like you. Okay, but if we start ignoring the law for some people, where does it end? Tommy ran her hand through her hair. Who says we have to ignore the law? I'm not suggesting you turn a blind eye to an assault or a robbery just because the perpetrator has a substance use disorder or suffers from mental health issues. Tommy shook her head, but she was still smiling. There are a lot of hypothetical scenarios I could play out for you where I'm not sure it would be very black and white. What happens then? How about this? Would you ever beat up a suspect to get them to confess to a crime or trample on someone's rights just a little bit to ensure you got your big bad criminal? Tommy looked taken aback. Of course not. That would make me a really bad cop. Well, there are a lot of hypothetical scenarios where some people might say it was justified. TV cops do it all the time. Natasha, I don't play a cop on TV. I'm a real one, and I don't do that kind of bullshit. Natasha touched Tommy's hand. So how about we start trusting each other and face those hypotheticals you're so worried about together? I showed you some of mine today, and you seem to like what you saw. Are you ready to reciprocate? Tommy's cheeks were flushed. Do I want to know what reciprocating looks like? Natasha rubbed her hands together. For now, I want to know why Lenny called you J2. I expected so much more from you. This is the soft toss warm-up. Natasha turned to Tommy and waited. I'll try not to strike out. A good-looking strong girl like you? Don't imagine you strike out all that often. Tommy winked. My father's name is Thomas Henry Finch. When Harry was born, my parents named her Henrietta. I was next, and they named me Thomasina. I'm not sure when people started calling us Junior 1 and Junior 2, J1 and J2. I don't think my brother's really ever gotten over being left out. I think he became a cop, so he wouldn't be left out of that too. Good Lord, there are 3 Finch family cops in this city? All right, tell me about your brother. Is he the youngest? What's his name? He is the youngest. His name's Cody. We used to call him AJ when he was a kid for Alice Jr., so he'd feel included. That's my mother's name. Your mother's Alice Finch? Wasn't she all about progressive policing and getting cops into neighborhoods to be partners with their community? Tommy looked suspicious. She nodded. Great, so she'll definitely be on my side. When can I meet her? We can draw up teams. I assume Harry will be Team Tommy. I'm sure you two would follow each other into the mouth of a volcano. You are not drafting my mother onto a team against me. What kind of hooligan are you? Where does your father stand on this? I bet I can pull AJ to Team Darkside. When's the next family dinner? Tommy got up, shaking her head. Natasha saw a smile, even if Tommy was trying to hide it. I'm going to win you over, Officer Finch. You can come to my side willingly, or I'll play dirty and talk to your mother. Get in the car. Tommy held the door for Natasha. We have work to do. Now you're talking. Are you going to let me out of the car this time? I'll take it under advisement, but stop threatening with me with my mother. That's a low blow, and you know it. Natasha laughed. It was, but Tommy was talking to her and looked more relaxed than she had at any point since the day they'd met. Another roadblock in their professional relationship was likely just around the bend, but Natasha felt better equipped to handle it after a food truck lunch and learning more about Tommy. If her mother was Alice Finch and her sister and brother were cops too, it was no wonder Tommy had very specific ideas about the way she should do her job. She could probably recite Miranda rights before her ABCs. So how did she convince Tommy to take the leap of faith on someone she didn't really know or trust? First things first, she had to figure out how to get Tommy to let her prove herself so she could do her job.
I love that. What a great dynamic between those characters. So this book and all the books in this kind of loosely connected series does deal with kind of some of the harder aspects of life. You have addiction and violence and mental health and whatnot. And some romance writers opt to not write about topics like that. So my question for you is, why did you choose to write this series and to explore those topics? What about it is important to you?
A couple of things. One, I've worked in addiction research for 15 years, so it's something that I'm familiar with. And I think people are scared of people who have addiction, or they kind of don't understand it. I think people with mental health issues and substance use disorders have been kind of negatively portrayed in media for, I don't know, forever, as a certain kind of person, or a certain, they have certain moral weaknesses, or, there's all kinds of portrayals out there. And that's certainly not the experience that I've ever had. I think the other thing is that, substance use disorders, mental health issues, that's real life. I think with the opioid addictions and mental health disorders, I think probably just about everybody knows somebody who struggled with that. So I could write about, perfect people, but perfect people don't exist in the world. So I wanted to write about things that I know and people that I know, and people are messy, and messy is kind of real life. And I wanted to make sure that the people that I know that I've met through some of my work were portrayed in a way that felt real to me.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I really appreciate that you're writing this series. And I know we have a lot of readers that do too. Just to let all our participants know too, Jesse's series has gotten some great reviews. And Serenity too, if you haven't picked it up, some really great reviews. So we really feel like her portrayal of these issues is really genuine and on point. So thanks for that, Jesse.
You're welcome.
All right, next up, we have the lovely Aurora Ray. Oh, it's you again. What? Uh-oh.
Of course, they chose this exact moment to just completely freak out. So I'm going to seduce them with treats. Give me like 2 seconds.
Okay, no worries. All right, everyone else, jump back on the video really quick. I'll ask a question while Aurora is handling her dog emergency. Genevieve and Jesse, if you can, yep, come back on. Awesome. All right. All right. So let me look at my list of questions here. What do I have? Okay. What do you hope that readers will like about your book? Genevieve, why don't you start?
Most of it, I guess, but I suppose the characters, like that's always been my biggest focus. You know, I just want people to fall in love with the people that I make.
Awesome, love it. Jesse, how about you? What do you hope readers will like about your book?
I hope that they like that I hope that they recognize something in the book about somebody that they know or an issue that they, you know, have experienced. I also hope that the book makes them think about somebody that they've met or read about in a different way. And I hope that it makes them laugh a little bit too. I try not to make them, even though they deal with kind of serious topics, I try to at least make them humorous and not too dark. And nobody wants to read a romance novel that's going to make you down and depressed the whole time. So
Sure.
I hope they like the humor of it as well.
Well, I have to admit that I do get whiny and angry when hungry. I don't know anything else you want to say in the chat roll. But that one did make me smile because I will totally cop to that. All right, Aurora.
I do too.
Yep, it's real. How are we doing, Aurora?
I am good. I'm so sorry. Everyone's being a little crazy today.
All right. Why don't you answer the question too before you start? What is it that you hope readers will like about your book?
I mean, I think one of my favorite things to write is like the banter. Meet cute's probably my single sort of favorite element of a romance to write. But I think there's sort of I tend to write pretty low angst romance, but I hope that I don't sacrifice kind of genuine depth of character and kind of depth of feeling in that. And I hope that comes across to readers.
Sure, I love it. All right, why don't you introduce your book and start reading whenever you like, and Genevieve and I are gonna disappear.
All right, thank you. And thank you all for your patience. And I have a feeling I just flashed my like Zoom mullet of like really loud leggings as I went scurrying off with the dog. So I hope you enjoy that as well. Anyway, I'm going to be reading from You Again, which is my April release. It is a second chance romance. It is the story of high school sweethearts who broke up when one of the characters went to college and the other one slept with someone and ended up getting pregnant. And it's a decade later. And the character who went away, who essentially sort of moved away and never came home, is coming home to take care of her father. And so they've run into each other a few times. They've had some interactions and they've ended up at the same bar because it's a really small town and they have obviously a lot of overlapping friends. And they've spent a bit of the evening together. And so this is where we pick up. They got up and headed outside, past the smokers and a couple making out in the glow of an Abita sign. Away from the music and the crowd, the questions and the restless energy that had been chasing her for days resurfaced. When they got to her car, she realized Kate had parked in the next spot over. A sign maybe, or maybe having a couple of drinks gave her courage. So like, are we friends now? Sutton looked at her hands before braving a look into Kate's eyes. Kate shrugged. I don't see why not. Life's too short to hold grudges, right? Is that what you think I've been doing? Sutton leaned against the hood of her car. It wasn't how she'd classify her attempts to move on. Isn't it? You broke my heart, Kate. For all the fights they'd had when she learned Kate was pregnant, she'd never uttered those words. Her angry and broken 18-year-old self couldn't bring herself to. Kate folded her arms. And you don't think you broke mine? I couldn't not go to college. It would have killed my dad. You know that. You knew it then too, or at least you said you did. I did. I do. Kate dropped her arms and shook her head. I was ready to wait for you. It shouldn't still feel like a knife to the heart, but it did. But you didn't. Something passed through Kate's eyes that she couldn't decipher. I made a stupid, impulsive mistake. If only it had been just that, something she could forgive and try to forget. But it couldn't be that easy. Kate's mistake had resulted in a baby that, at the time, felt like so much more than she could handle. Not to mention a massive, constant, and insurmountable reminder of the fact that Kate had cheated on her. But it changed everything. It did. I'm sorry. I was sorry then, and I'm sorry for it still. At the time, Sutton refused to let the apologies sink in, but the magic of time and space worked wonders, and she felt Kate's words seep in, take root. I know, and I'm sorry I ran. Kate nodded. You did what you had to do. So did I. I'm sorry I hurt you, but I won't be sorry for the fact that Harper was born. The ferocity in Kate's voice, the unflinching certainty, hit Sutton hard. It was that ferocity, at least in part, that made her fall in love with Kate in the first place. It looked as good on her now as it did then. Harper's amazing. You've done an amazing job raising her. I'm only just getting to know her, but that much is clear. Kate's features softened. That was a good look on her too. Thank you. I mean it. It sort of filled me with dread knowing I'd wind up meeting her, but she's absolutely impossible not to like. Kate angled her head and a hint of a smirk played at the corner of her mouth. Dread seems a bit much, doesn't it? I thought seeing her would remind me over and over of why we broke up. It felt pathetic to say that out loud, but if they were going to have this conversation, they might as well have all of it. Kate let out a sigh. I don't see that at all. Sutton shook her head. I don't either. She's so her own person, but also like a mini version of you at the same time. The you I met in 4th grade and wanted desperately to like me. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to take that as a compliment. You are, it is. Sutton blew out a breath. I haven't been holding a grudge. Kate regarded her with something just shy of suspicion. Then what have you been doing? Holding on to that broken heart, focusing on work and living in a city she was growing to hate because she wasn't willing to take a chance on anything else? I'm not sure. Well, I've been living my life and trying not to hold on to regrets or hard feelings. She felt her shoulders slump, unsure she could say the same. What do you want, Sutton? Kate's tone was gentle, but it was a loaded question if she ever heard one. Kate stood across from her, hip cocked slightly. The only thing coming through loud and clear in Sutton's mind was longing. I'm not sure of that either. Well, if you don't know, I can't help you. There wasn't anger in Kate's voice or even impatience, just a simple statement of fact. Friends would be nice, and more than I expected. In this moment, she couldn't remember why that felt so impossible. Kate tilted her head to one side, kind of a what am I going to do with you look, but with affection. She came and leaned on the hood beside Sutton. After a long moment, she gently bumped her shoulder to Sutton's. Seems like a good start. Could it be as simple as that? Kate made it seem so. One more thing Sutton loved about her. She could make anything seem not just possible, but eminently doable. Agreed. They stayed like that for a while, shoulders touching. She didn't want to keep Kate, but she also didn't want to lose this moment, this feeling. She hadn't realized how much sadness and anger she'd still been carrying around. Shedding it left her so light, she just wanted to sit and enjoy it. Whether Kate sensed that or was having a moment of her own, she couldn't be sure. All she knew was that sitting together like this on a sultry June night reminded her of so many nights spent just like that. And it was the closest she'd been to perfection in a long time.
Aww, Aurora Ray, pulling at the heartstrings. Why don't you introduce everyone to your puppy, because we're all so curious. So cute.
This is Oliver. Many of you know Oliver well. Mabel's currently minding her business, but the nice weather brings out pedestrians, and apparently they look like invaders from another planet as they walk by. So
there you go. I got one just like that, just about that size too, and they're good alarm clocks and alert dogs.
Seriously, is the dog getting along with the cat? Is Nellie getting along with Veg?
Yeah, so Nellie and Vegemite get along really well, but I have another cat, a lesser known cat, who doesn't get along with either of them.
Oh.
So there's some dynamics going on there, but I'm lucky that Nellie and Vegemite do get along, fortunately. All right, so you have written quite a number of romances at this point. And this one particularly is a reunion romance, which is a couple who was together previously and broke up and are kind of seeing each other again and, perhaps contemplating reuniting. So what is it about the reunion romance that's kind of different? Did you encounter anything different when writing this book, because they have such a history for you to play with? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think it can be really nice when there is a history, because it gives you so much to draw on from page one. There's so much less setup. They can sort of be reacting to each other even before they bump into each other again. I think one of the interesting things is, especially in this one was a little tricky because the reason they broke up was that one of them cheated. I think that's always a little bit of a touchy subject, especially when it comes to women loving women romances. There are some readers who find it unforgivable, even at like 17. And so I think handling that delicately was a challenge. When I started writing it, I think I intended it to be a much more angsty book than it turned out to be. I wrote most of it during the pandemic, and I think I just needed something to feel good. So even though it sort of had a little bit of heartbreak as its foundation, it very quickly became more warm and fuzzy than anything else.
I love that. And I feel like readers, a lot of readers feel the same way too, especially right now. I think it's interesting what you said about like what it is that breaks them up and then how you overcome that kind of in your current story, because it needs to be sufficient enough to break up these two people who are meant for each other. But also you have to be able to overcome it in order for them to get back together. So it's always tough to like find that balance of what is it that broke them up, and then how do you overcome that? Awesome. All right, if everyone can jump back on. Yeah, all right. If anyone in our group of lovely participants would like to post a question to our authors, you can put it in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And I will grab them from there if there are any, but I will start us off. We have about 10 minutes. And I'm going to ask you, who is your favorite character in this book? Doesn't have to be one of your main protagonists. Who is your favorite character and why are they your favorite? Jessie.
I have two, I think. I like Natasha a lot because she knows who she is. She knows what she wants. And she has this really strong drive to follow kind of her morals and her values, which is kind of making the world better for vulnerable folks, which I admire. I also really like this character called Zookeeper, who is a drug dealer and is kind of a jerk. But she also has her own moral code that does not follow rules or laws or what I think most law-abiding citizens would consider to be a moral code, but she has it. It's very strong for her. But she is kind of this wild card. You really never know what she's going to do or whether she's going to follow kind of the good guys and the protagonists or whether she's going to go off and throw everything into chaos. and I feel like I don't always have a good handle on what she's going to do at the start of the book, but she's kind of fun to write because of that.
That's great. I always like my characters who are kind of jerks too. They're just kind of more fun sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think you also have the title of your next book you haven't written yet. I think Wildcard is a really good title. You should keep that one. Do something.
I'll write that one down.
Aurora, how about you? Who's your favorite character and why?
I think for me in this one, it's a little bit of a gimme. I get to write like a 9-year-old little girl, Kate's daughter, Harper. And writing kids is just so much fun because, you know, I was definitely a total nerd bird kid, so not cool. And yet when you write fiction, you can actually make sort of a nerdy, precocious kid cool. And, you know, you try to give them some realism and occasional meltdowns and tantrums, but for the most part, you get to just make them, you know, a little, you know, not really comic relief, but like there's so much humor in a kid and how they see the world and how they negotiate it and sort of feel like grown-ups when they're so far from that.
I love that. I think that I'm not going to say whether or not you were cool as a kid, but I think if you weren't, you were making up for it as an adult.
Painfully uncool, like
Oh,
just
come on.
unarguably.
I will dispute that. Genevieve, how about you? Who is your favorite character and why?
My favorite character in this book is definitely Taya. She is Devana's best friend. She's Russian, and they constantly hate on each other for one being Russian and the other Lithuanian, as there's a decent bit of animosity there due to the USSR. And she's just the worst. She is so snarky and just constantly giving Devana a hard time throughout the entire book, and I love her so much.
Awesome. Alrighty. So we do have a question from our lovely studio audience. This is from Sandra Santiago, who is one of our authors and will be on the next panel. Do you have a random piece of knowledge about your characters that didn't make it into the book, but that you find interesting? Give you a second. Aurora, you look like you have an answer.
Do I? You know, I don't have sort of a specific like tidbit that I can pull off the top of my head, but most people know that I do like personality profile like tests as part of my character development and character sketching. And I think it's really fun because to do that, you have to like answer questions like you're that character. And so it sort of forces you into thinking about your character in scenarios and places and situations that you probably won't put them in the book. And I think that can be really fun. And it gives you a really nice leg to stand on when you're trying to sort of like figure out how they might navigate a situation.
Cool, I like that. And if you ever see Aurora at an event, she may or may not talk you into a tarot reading, which I feel like you could use for your character if you wanted to.
It is definitely for sure, yeah.
All right, Jessie, how about you? What's a random piece of knowledge about your character that may not have made it into the book?
Well, I have quite a bit built up for the Zookeeper and Parrot Master because they are kind of they're actually the through line between the 3 books as part of this loose series. So, so the Zookeeper has this entire backstory and kind of bonkers history that I've slowly been kind of unraveling. And so I don't want to put too much out there, but she's the one I think that I have the most kind of the firmest grasp on, that some of it didn't make it in here.
Can you tell us why she's called Zookeeper?
Yeah, so she's called the Zookeeper because although she is a drug dealer and is, far, far outside the law, she has this, what she calls her flock of mostly women and young folks who she looks after and kind of has taken under her wing. And in order to protect them, she gives them all animal names. So somebody will be like the baby giraffe and somebody's an armadillo. And so she keeps them all kind of code named. And so they call her the Zookeeper because she has this flock of random animals that she looks after. And wherever they are in the city, they're kind of under her protection. And so that's why she's called the zookeeper.
Oh, I love that. And you give the character a warm, fuzzy heart underneath it all.
I wouldn't call her warm and fuzzy,
No,
but
no.
she has some redeeming qualities, but maybe not too many.
Genevieve, how about you? What's a random piece of knowledge about your character that didn't make it into the book?
Well, the second I heard that question, I forgot literally everything about every character I've ever written. But I can give a bit of meta, story character information, which is that I try to always have a character for the next book that takes place in this universe to have a cameo in the previous book, or at least I like to do that if I can. I guess there's only actually a mention of a character in the first one for being in Olivia, but so there's actually a lawyer in Olivia that when I first wrote it wasn't Devana, but because I had already come up with Aimee by the time Olivia was in editing, she was able to become Devana, so she actually gets an appearance in a book that takes place 10 years later.
Awesome, I love that. Yay for crossover characters and for being flexible when needed. All right, I think we have time for one more question, maybe two, but we'll start with one. From Anne Hart. Do you have a book that you really want to write but haven't yet? And if you haven't written it, why not? Genevieve, we'll start with you.
A book that I really want to write, and why haven't I written it? Honestly, I've been wanting to write more vampire novels, but I try not to write too many of them because I don't want to pigeonhole myself as just writing vampire books.
For sure, it's popular though. I don't know. I feel like being known as the vampire lady wouldn't be such a terrible moniker to have. Aurora, how about you? Do you have a book you really want to write but haven't yet?
So many. You just get random ideas and you try to remember to jot them down. But I think for the moment, sort of one of the things that the forefront of my mind is writing a book with a trans main character. It's something I've been kicking around for a long time. The book that's coming out now, You Again, has a secondary character who's trans Kate's brother. And I'm deciding whether or not he might deserve his own story. And if I can get Sandy to let me write it.
I mean, I feel like I'm already sold. So awesome. All right, Jesse, how about you? Do you have a book you want to write but haven't?
I really want to write a superhero book. And I have not figured out how to do it, but I may have an idea, and then I really have to pitch it hard to Sandy to get her to agree.
You guys act like I always say no.
No, I have not read, and I'm sure they're out there, but I have not read a superhero women loving women romance novel. So it took me a long time to figure out how I would make that happen. And I maybe have an idea about it. So I'll see. I'll get around to figuring out a good pitch for it.
I like it. It kind of sounds cool. All right, we have about 1 minute. So we were going to do a really quick question. If readers would like to find you on the interwebs, where should they go to find you, to learn more about you, to see cute photos of your animals if you have them? Aurora, where do people find you online?
Mostly on Instagram and Facebook. I think it's Aurora Ray Writes, but I'm hard to miss. And yeah, lots of animals and DIY projects gone awry.
Awesome. Jesse?
I have a Facebook profile, but I am the weirdo of this 21st century and really don't have a social media presence. So if you would like to talk to me, then send me an email, jessiejthoma@gmail.com. And when the world opens back up, I am at a lot of Pride events. And until then, I guess we'll see each other in little Zoom boxes like this.
Awesome. Genevieve, how about you? Where can they find you online?
I've got a Facebook as Genevieve McCluer, email genevievemccluer@gmail.com, website genevievemccluer.com, and for Twitter it's author McCluer because my name is too long.
I love that. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for BSB Preview, the 5 p.m. panel. We do have another one coming up in just about 9 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great night.